Select Committee said that these IPPs that are still in the system should be abolished and that the people should be resentenced to give them a determinate sentence. You voted against that report. Why did you vote against?
But I think the first thing to say is you've done a good job of talking about the unfairness that's definitely there in the system. As you mentioned, there are some people that are 10 years over the original tariff. Some of them were only given an original sentence of a couple of years. So you can imagine if you're in prison, you were told your minimum sentence was a couple of years. You've seen other people come into prison for a similar offence, leave many years, you're still there. But that's a really difficult thing to go through. And not just that, sometimes the parole board who decides whether these prisoners can be released might say, you can potentially be released, potentially, but we think you need to do XYZ programme in prison. Some of these prisoners can't access those programmes. So you can imagine there's a real injustice there. But ultimately, I felt that the thing we had to keep in mind is that in all the evidence we heard, and we heard a lot of evidence that these prisoners being on the sentence, having this unending sentence that they felt wasn't fair, was making it very difficult for them to rehabilitate. In amongst those people, there were some prisoners that the experts that we spoke to that worked with them felt really were still dangerous. And actually, they would have not wanted them to be released from prison. And ultimately, if you go through a resentencing exercise, the sentences we've got available to us now would have meant some of them could have potentially been released at some point. And I just personally felt, as much as I had a lot of sympathy for some of the prisoners in this situation, that I just felt we couldn't justify letting out what are some potentially very dangerous people. And that's what meant in the end I didn't agree, even if I agreed with a lot of the issues that the Justice Select Committee, my colleagues, raised in this regard.
Keiran, you're a doctor, but actually you come from a family of police officers. So do you think you were bringing your knowledge here from your sort of family background on what you thought, was a danger to have back on the street?
Well, I guess I spent a few years actually volunteering as a police officer myself. And I think that the one lesson I took from all that is very, very sadly, there are just people out there who, with the best efforts in the world, just don't leave a life of crime. And actually, we know even with good rehabilitation, it's quite difficult to get people, if they're in a pattern of offending, for whatever those reasons might be, it's quite hard to get them out of it. Most people actually just grow out of it. They get fed up with that lifestyle. External action doesn't seem to have a huge effect, no matter how good it is. And I used to deal with people who were just arrested again and again and again, and they were given community orders and rehab orders, and it didn't make a difference. And so generally speaking, I'm wary of repeat offenders and the fact that we let repeat offenders out again and again and again, and they go on to commit more and more crime. And so these people in particular, these are people that some of them we know are very dangerous. The idea that we might let them out is difficult for me. Other people will point out quite fairly that that's how our system works. Outside of this small group of people, we let people out of prison all the time who we think may well go on to offend. If they've served their sentence, even if they haven't changed their ways in prison, we still let them out. And so that's again why I understand why people feel this group has been hard done by. But ultimately, that for me wasn't enough to let me say that we should let out some people that are going to be very serious potential reoffenders.
Now, Donna Mooney, Keiran, who is from a group called Ungrip, her brother took his own life in 2015 following a second refusal from the parole board to be released. I know she gave evidence to the Select Committee. He'd served 6 years of an IPP with a 4-year tariff, and she said that one of the reasons why he took his own life was that he referred to the sentence as a mental torture, a sentence that keeps you in prison with no idea if you'll ever be released. And Ken Clarke, when he abolished these IPPs, said that basically, how do you ever prove that you're no longer a danger to society? It's virtually impossible to do. Do you not have sympathy for what Ken Clarke and Donna say there?
Yeah, I definitely do. But I mean, the one thing I would say is that the vast majority of these prisoners have been released. So that was another reason why I felt on balance that there wasn't the justification, because actually you can be released on these sentences. Thousands of people have been released. As you said, of the almost 9,000 that were originally given one of these sentences, only 1,500 roughly have never been released. So the vast majority have been released. It is possible to prove that you're safe within the prison environment and what's available. But what I would agree is it's a very difficult thing to go through. And I definitely agree that we need to do more to help those prisoners make sure that they get all the support they need to show that they're potentially safe to be released. No disagreement with that. And definitely we heard very powerfully what it must be like to be under one of those sentences. Politics, being an MP is often about weighing two different injustices. On the one hand, we've got the injustice of people who are going through a bit of a torture, which is being in prison, not knowing when you might get out. On the other hand, there's the risk that we let some people out that we know are still dangerous, and they might go on to commit very serious further offences. That wouldn't be fair on those victims and their friends and family either. So, politicians, reasonable people can disagree on this issue, I think.